Imaginary numbers don't come up very often on the SAT, and when they do, a lot of the times it doesn't really matter. You can kind of just treat the I like a variable. And so let's do that at first. We should treat it like a variable, and we should recognize that this is really just about subtracting fractions. There are rules for that. You need to know those rules outside of the imaginary numbers. We need to have common denominators in order to do the subtraction. So what would we do? We would multiply the second fraction by I over I, so we have a common denominator. 5 over I squared minus 4i over I squared, and then now we can do the subtraction. That is really just 5 minus 4i over I squared. So we can't really combine the two terms on top because that I is behaving kind of like a variable, and so we wouldn't be able to combine them any further, but we are able to combine them enough that we can now turn this into one giant fraction. And so that kind of leads us maybe into choice like B here, because we do have this 5 minus 4i, but we also need to bring into account the I squared. And so this is where it becomes really about imaginary numbers. We are told that I is equal to the square root of -1, but honestly, that is not particularly helpful. The rule that we really need to know for the SAT is that I squared is equal to -1. So that lets us make a substitution. We would never substitute radical -1 in for I normally because radical -1 is really messy. That's why we invented I in the first place, to replace that messy thing. And so I squared being -1 is actually a very useful substitution. And so this I squared can become a -1. And that's going to change things. So 5 minus 4i is now being divided by -1. And that's going to flip the sign of these two things so that it becomes -5 plus 4i. They're going to switch, and that's going to get rid of the denominator as well. So choice C is the answer here. This is very difficult. If you are really reaching for a top score, you do need to know how imaginary numbers work, but they do not come up very often, so they are probably not a priority for most of you. So just judge yourself, practice them if you need to, and then you'll be able to get these right.